on reclaimed fabric. An assortment of clothing is heaped in a basket near my mother's old black antique-looking sewing machine, clothing that would someday become part of a quilt, a patchwork skirt, a patch on the knee of blue jeans, or a salvage for their buttons, the least useful parts being used for oil paint rags by my mother, the artist. When I first heard about the use of reclaimed fabric, that's what I imagined, or scraps of different types of cloth of all colors and patterns that had been swept off the floors of warehouses, where the pieces had fallen from drafting tables and sewing machines, having been cut from the edges of clothing patterns. My mother is fond of telling me how during the Great Depression, women learned to make clothing from any cloth they could find, and this often meant using the cloth from large flour sacks. These sacks of flour sometimes came with patterns on them, often tiny flower patterns. Women turned to using flour and feed sacks to make everything in the house they needed. This included dresses. The wrap dress is a common pattern used during these times, probably because no buttons or zippers were needed to secure the garment, just sashes and ties, which could be made from the same flour sack cloth. When the producers of flour discovered that their products were in great demand for their sacks, they began to compete with each other for this new market. Companies made their patterns brighter and better to attract shoppers. Artists were hired to make the designs even better. Women making dresses from flour sacks often lost cloth because of the ink labels on the bags. Driven by competition, flour mills began putting their company labels on the bags with ink that washed off, even including instructions on how to wash the sack to remove the ink. Some put their logos on the bags in the form of a paper band wrapped around the flour sack. I realize now that dead stock textiles are nothing like my mother's pile of clothing next to a sewing machine or the flour sacks used by the women of the Great Depression. It surprised me to learn that dead stock fabric is still on bolts and rolls. Sometimes this cloth has slight damage, and large clothing manufacturers do not have the time to cut around the damaged sections to salvage the usable. Sometimes rolls end up as orphaned rolls because they are out of season, or their color pattern design did not meet the expectations of manufacturers. Quite often, though, these rolls end up orphaned just because a manufacturer overstocked a textile.